So look at the smartphone you're probably holding right now, or, the massive cloud networks keeping your office running. Have you ever stopped to think about how this whole global infrastructure was built? And maybe more importantly, who actually drew up the original plans? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into how one single person's past is literally the fundamental blueprint for our modern world. We're talking about the history of Bill Gates, the architect of the digital age. We're going to see how some really early choices made decades ago laid the absolute permanent foundation for the tech we rely on every single day.
Okay, so let's get one thing straight right off the bat. We aren't just looking at a standard run-of-the-mill biography today. Not at all. Think about what an architect actually does, right? They don't just stand around watching a building go up. They're the ones who meticulously design the incredibly complex structures that actually allow the building to stand in the first place. When we take that rigorous definition and apply it to the digital age, we're looking at deliberate, intentional design. We are talking about writing the foundational code, setting up those early software standards, and, creating these structural business models that the entire tech industry is literally still built upon today. The title, The Digital Age Architect, is incredibly deliberate. It frames our subject not just as a participant in the tech boom, but as the primary mastermind behind the whole shebang. It's like the difference between just living in a house versus being the guy who spent months drawing its blueprints. The vision here wasn't to just build a single piece of computer hardware. Actually, scratch that, it was way bigger. The vision was to build the underlying operating system that every single computer in the world would eventually need. It positions him not as some lucky bystander who was just in the right place at the right time, but as the true foundational creator of the era we navigate every day. And this brings us to a massive difference in how we usually think about technological history. It's the profound difference between what we can call passive history, which is this kind of naive idea that the personal computer revolution just organically happened all on its own, and active architecture. Listen, the digital landscape we know wasn't an accident. No way. It was a calculated, deliberate design shaped by very specific, highly strategic choices made back in the 1970s and 80s. So his life isn't just a random timeline of dates. It represents the active, deliberate construction of the software ecosystem that completely surrounds us today.
All right, let's actually dive right into this historical narrative. When we look at the history of Bill Gates through this specific lens of active architecture, we have to look at the timeline entirely differently. This isn't just some nostalgic trip back to the days of floppy disks and dial-up modems. It's a structural analysis of the very bedrock of the technological house we all live in today. Every major milestone acts as a vital pillar holding up our modern digital economy. So by tracing this history chronologically, we can literally watch our modern era being constructed piece by piece. We kick things off with the early era. This is the initial drafting of the concepts, right? This takes us to Harvard and that massive breakthrough development of Altair Basic. That was the moment that proved software could actually be its own standalone industry. Then we transition into the development era. This is where the complex structure really starts to take massive shape. We're talking the founding of Microsoft and the totally game-changing strategic licensing of MS-DOS to IBM. That single move put a software right at the epicenter of the PC boom. And finally, we arrive at the digital age era itself, the global dominance of Windows, the internet boom, and the realization of that ultimate vision, a computer on every desk and in every home. Now, the source text explicitly binds his name forever to the architecture of our modern technology, and it leaves absolutely zero room for ambiguity. Because Microsoft software became the absolute default operating system for basically the entire globe, you essentially cannot untangle the history of the man from the structural reality of the digital age. They are, for all intents and purposes, one and the same. The decisions he made about licensing, user interfaces, and software compatibility, those choices fundamentally dictated exactly how humans would interact with machines for generations to come. And that brings us to the completed structure, the living, breathing digital world that is still being actively shaped by those foundational designs. The architecture we've been talking about isn't just some static monument from the past. Not at all. The blueprints drawn up back then are the exact same schematics determining how we communicate, work, and just live right now. Think about standardized graphical user interfaces or, those massive enterprise software ecosystems that power global commerce today. Every single one of those traces its conceptual roots straight back to those original architectural choices.
Okay, bringing it all together, the crucial point really comes down to these key takeaways. First, the absolute importance of his history, its structural knowledge of our modern economy, not just fun tech trivia. Second, the whole concept of the digital age as a heavily designed, standardized construct rather than just some historical accident. And third, the defining role of the architect in actively building that construct. Honestly, knowing this history is absolutely crucial because it lets us clearly see the hidden scaffolding of the platforms, operating systems, and networks we interface with every single day. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. If one individual's history so heavily architected the digital age we live in right now, whose history is architecting our future? As things like artificial intelligence and spatial computing rapidly emerge, the technological blueprints of tomorrow are being actively drawn up around us today by entirely new architects. So keep your eyes open to the architecture being built all around you, and I'll catch you next time.